Here's a thought, and maybe a follow-up on my last video too. Here's a thought. Stuff I noodle on. People that are paying attention to some of my thinking and how to unravel the situation that we find ourselves in personally and collectively, in the bigger picture and the smaller picture. Bigger picture, smaller picture. My thought, bigger picture, smaller picture. If you're looking at mathematics and numbers and things that we invent in order to describe the reality that we live in, and we've capitulated to the idea that there is a form of knowledge called science, which has been hijacked. It's not to say there isn't something that is valuable in objective observation. If that was possible, that would be really interesting. Objective observations about who we are, what we exist in, how do we define ourselves within this mystery. Anyway, there are some people that have given it a shot. Honestly, I imagine there are a lot of honest people. You know, I like honesty more than truth. That there are honest people who are presenting their vision of the universe. And for example, if you look at numbers and mathematics, that if you go to the furthest expanses of what is expressed or explained to be our cosmos, our universe, and if you go into the most smallest, the leptons, the mutons, the quarks, the smallest part of our existence, and imagining what it is, let's say in terms of an atom, how many atoms are there in the known universe as we have been told, and part of this thinking has to do that this is a phenomenal bunch of hooey, sort of like the idea when you get into observation and one's own ability to with reason, whatever that might be, the ability to reason, to think things through in a reasonable way. What is it, who we are, and the people that have expressed, the scientists that have expressed the furthest and the smallest, for example, I'll give you the number, more or less. You can research this yourself and change these numbers if in fact I'm wrong, but the number 10 to the power of 80 comes up curiously, quite often in terms of, for example, the number of atoms that exist in the universe, or the farthest distance, the 13.8 light years we supposedly we're in a cosmos that is 13.8 light years and expanding, is something possibly 10 to the power of 80 in terms of miles or kilometers. Or if you have the smallest object, it is a size 10 to the minus 80. What's in the middle? What's in the middle? Wow. We find ourselves the way that pre-Galileo and Copernicus people were saying the human being is the center of the universe. And I quite agree with this notion of the human being, since we are us, we are human beings. We are the center of the universe, and the numbers expressed by the white coats seem to confirm this, that if you go the furthest out and the most minutest particle, what is in the middle? It's us. Now, you know, I chuckle about this because the reality we create around us, or we create systems and symbols that express that we fundamentally see ourselves as the center of the universe, and rightfully too, because we don't have any other perspective than our own, who we are, your perspective of yourself and myself is unadulterated. It cannot be influenced by anything other than what I perceive. So I'm attacking notions of reality and people that are attempting to unravel the subterfuge that exists in order to divert us by saying, for example, that we possibly live in a simulation, something that is external to us, manipulating our reality from the point of view of I suppose symbols. I love symbols. I think they represent what people are really thinking. You know, people can talk a lot and tell you shit, like all the white coats, like the Tyson types and the Hawking, these brilliant scientists, Miku Kaku. In our neck of the woods, it's David Suzuki that tell us an objective reality, but I really have grave doubt that there is such a thing as an objective reality. And all the indicators that when I noodle on this, I come across this, that for example, like I said, the furthest distance and the smallest distance that we can imagine is more or less the same with us in the middle. Why? I mean, that's really curious, don't you think? I mean, it's weird, it's strange. And this sort of thought process that goes through me helps me to trust what I advocate on my channel when I make a painting. I'm a painter. I make paintings, and they're basically paintings that I make that come out of my essence, reinforce something that is very likely true, not just for myself, but possibly others as well, in a symbolic sense. This is, I think, something that I could probably go into in terms of the value of art. What is it really that art means to us? And it identifies an aspect, the best art, an aspect that makes us understand something of who we are personally and also collectively, how we fit into each other's existence. And what has occurred, for the most part now, in what I call the culture of death, is that this notion of discovery and understanding has been hijacked in order to divert and manipulate for the benefit of. In other words, there are secondary gains involved in people have notions that they can enjoy themselves more at the discomfort of another or the displeasure or certain people appear to delight in the misfortune of others. This seems to be quite operative in this culture. It tends to be hidden somewhat behind symbols that we get hoodwinked by, the glitz, the glamour, the icons, the magnificent people that represent the highest part of ourselves, like the artists that never open their pie holes about anything that is of value to another person other than produce their work. And we can dance on this pin that you can produce brilliant work. Like, I mean, I find the cello suites by Bach to be extraordinary on a level that engages me. The complexity that I feel is evoked within my own sense of self, that there are so many layers within myself. Certain art seems to have the ability to draw out aspects of myself that I was not aware of. This is the fabulousness about art. And this has also been taken away in order to manipulate. So we have pop culture, what we find to have people are held up to us that are told are valuable and meaningful in their expression. But what they do is they reduce the complexity to a simplicity, so that, for example, in music, let's say, you have a kind of tribal repetitive beat, which in itself has a quality of possibly uplifting us in some way, but the way it is produced in some of the I guess the rock elements of music is quite depressing. It literally it makes me feel that I'm vibrating on a very low level. And sometimes I actually like vibrating on a low level. I mean, I have my vices, and I have a scotch and a cigar, and it's not exactly living up to my potential as a being with a body that needs to be treated right. Okay, my ruminations, and I'm going to reference my last video again, that it's curious that the highest part of what is understood to be science puts us right square in the middle. What they say, no, Galileo said, no, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth, it's the other way around. So it eliminates the idea that we are the center of the universe, but everything after that seems to confirm that we are the center of the universe. And it's for me, the thing about finding a grassroots connection, a somehow a sense of self with other human beings is the objective that I pursue. I have a selfish interest in making the work that I make. It's like primarily for myself, but in the context of my extended family that I've talked about, there is a communion of like-minded souls and spirits. The way I have picked my fight on Fukushima, and many other souls of conscience have understood that this is the most monumental event in the history of being us, human, from the point of view that it could destroy everything. This is the way I look at it. And my thought is to find an entry into a fundamental understanding about a wholesome nature and a dysfunctional nature. And the reason we have this dilemma, this problem, this monumental problem of the nuclear criminal syndicate running away, like all the other organizations that are at the root of our misfortune, what allows this to happen? What happens that we lose our way? What happens that we begin, let's say, with the medievals, with Giotto, Cimabue, Masaccio, Rublev, people that have understood something about our nature that is inclusive. We end up with post-Galilean, Copernican philosophies that separate us from something that leads us down a path of utter and total destruction. And what is it that has been, what Pandora's box has been opened here? And in my last video I said, and I'm convinced this is how it works, that each human being alive has a fundamental nature comprised of complex feelings, thoughts, emotions, desires. And these have been, or let me put it this way, these fundamental notions of self have been reduced to a very narrow scope. I find this in art, the way it is expressed, even though diversity and all of this, everything feels to be almost exactly the same to me now. There is no diversity from the point of view that people express the complex nature of themselves in some way. Something has been reduced to an almost, it's an insidious part of us that seems to triumph. This desire, as I said in my last video, to delight in the misfortune and suffering of others. This seems to pervade the culture that we live in. Like, get away with something. It's sort of like the idea of being able to make money on the stock market. I mean, it's totally insane. It's crazy. If you make money, somebody else loses. There is no sharing here. It doesn't work because it's no longer focused on production and wealth creation in that sense. It's a casino, it's a gambling thing. So we've become involved in habits that continuously reinforce the idea that we can benefit from the misfortune of others. And the reason it's in place, and this is really dark, I find this to be really dark, that if you go into the nature of our being as innocent and vulnerable, this is what is always attacked. This is something that is always exploited, which is why you have in our culture that children are so abused, misused, trafficked. We know this is happening, people. The trafficking of children, the trafficking of sex slaves, the abuse of the elderly, that the vulnerable and the innocent seem to be the recipients because they can't fight back. You see, there are a bunch of chicken necks out there who are running the show, who are creating these systems that are fundamentally destroying this fundamental aspect within ourselves, that we are the center of the cosmos, of the universe. So if you can live with the idea of destroying another person, another soul, or abusing another soul, it deflects away from the idea that every individual is important because we are the center. We make up something in a mystery, in an expansive mystery, that not one single soul should be lost. We should not lose anyone along the way. We should help and gather our forces to support every life form that exists around us, because in an expansive universe, supposedly 13.8 billion light years, which is a whole other story if you want to get into that. I'm going to noodle on this and have a response on this. It feels quite bogus. But anyway, the notions of our existence and how we relate to what is true, what is false, to come up with notions like 13.8 billion light years and big bangs and all these kind of high-minded quarks and leptons and God particles, we always end up, for some reason, as we are at the center of the universe, because we are all that we can conceive. It's like Robert Thurman, Carl Sagan had a conversation, and Carl Sagan was a professed atheist who said there's nothing after we die. It's a position that people can hold. And Robert Thurman, Uma Thurman's daddy, Papa Thurman, who was a Buddhist who came back from the East and brought back all the brilliance of the Buddhists. But he made a good point, and he said, if all that we can conceive of is something, how is it possible to conceive of nothing? We have no experience of nothing. So for anyone to claim that whatever that means to die, we have no concept of what it means there to be nothing. You see what I mean? So Thurman had a good point, and Carl Sagan was a gatekeeper and a front man for the whole cosmos idea about light and light speed and all of these notions that populate our mind, that have so completely infiltrated our own reason and observation and thought process. And I will not proclaim one thing to be more true than another, but I certainly know the way we are being told that we live on a ball, attracted to this ball by a mysterious force that no one can explain, called gravity. Oh, you just blah, 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 blah. Don't ask that question. Certain questions you can't ask. Well, if you cannot ask certain questions and have an explanation, there's something wrong. So I'm not saying our reality is any one specific thing. All I know is what is being propagated is not true. Is not true. It's just how it works. And this phenomenon about distance and the 10 to the power of 80 is a very curious phenomenon in my noodling today, that the distances seem to all come back more or less to the same size, the same numbers. And who invents these numbers are but a gaggle of degenerates who have decided that they should tell us the meaning of the universe. And you're much better off relying on a more organic position. I'm not advocating throwing off all that we have gained in terms of, for example, I think that certain diseases have been eradicated through hygiene. That I think this is very clear that people did not survive as well as we do from the point of view that there is hygiene. Mind you, we've toppled our health, our immune system is weakened by vaccinations and all the other shit that is the toxic materials that are being introduced. So there are aspects to our understanding and knowledge that has improved, but from a very fundamental point of view, we're still on a really nasty level adhering to the concept of delighting in the misfortune and suffering and hurt of others. This has to go. This has to go. And the only way it goes, like I always say, we exercise this phenomenal ability that each person has called a conscience to do the right thing. And if you want to argue with me about what is right and what is wrong, it's possible to be in confusion at times, but we work through that. As long as the intent is there to want to do the right thing, we're going to make it work. We're going to fix this problem we're in with Fukushima. We're going to fix our problems, and we're going to sideline all the reptiles and hyenas who have decided to take over the show and tell us who we are, because I'm not standing for it. Nobody's going to tell me who I am. I'll figure this out myself. I don't need you. If you can help me, I welcome it. If you undermine me, you're off. You're off the edge. I'm not interested in what you have to tell me. And it's an ongoing process. This is something that the deeper we go into our ability to do this phenomenal thing, the right thing, the closer we'll come to the meaning of who we are in this mystery. Follow up on my last one, and just here's a thought for you. 10 to the power of 80.